The story begins with our main protagonist, called Itsuki Takabana, who is unable to enter his school as he cannot produce his ID card. He is eventually cleared and allowed to go in as Izumi, the president of the student council, along with her entourage enter the school and grant him permission to do so. They don't know one another, which surprises Takabana, but she goes on to tell him that she has to know everyone. As Takabana arrives at school, his friend Kota greets him and encourages him to play the popular online game PSO2, also known as Phantasy Star Online 2. However, Takabana declines since he does not enjoy playing games. He receives an invitation to the student council president's meeting at the dorm the following day. Based on his grades and character, he is informed during the meeting that he has been appointed vice president of the school. Playing PSO2 is his first assignment, and while the school analyzes the student's social behavior from there, he is expected to compile his observations. Takabana continues with this task and encounters a veteran player who goes by Soro in the virtual world. Soro is happy to teach Takabana the game's tricks. The day after he turns in his report, Izumi gives him a requirement. No matter how immersed he becomes in PSO2, his grades cannot slip. Everyone in the student council is happy with Takabana's prompt response to work. Additionally, a transfer student named Suzuki is introduced to the students during class. After school, Takabana takes Suzuki, who is seated next to him, to the dorm and gives her a tour of the building. When he returns to his room, he attempts to advance some more in PSO2. He meets Soro and congratulates himself on a job well done. However, he is rudely yelled at by Soro, who accuses him of being a failure to the ARCS, his division of the game world. This comment makes Takabana unhappy and he shares it with Kota, after which he is given an explanation of the game's rules. Izumi, in the meantime, reveals herself to be Soro by accusing herself of treating him harshly. He hasn't posted anything online or in person since their encounter, which alarms her. Later, Takabana continues playing the game and defends Soro from an attack. Soro invites Takabana to the virtual concert on PSO2 as atonement for his harshness. In the council office, Suzuki disputes Izumi for designating Takabana as an ARC. However, Izumi explains that Takabana is the ideal candidate to demonstrate to the school that a student's social life has no bearing on how well they perform academically. She names Suzuki as Takabana's advisor. Following a game, Soro tells Takabana that by hurdling up with him, he is not truly enjoying PSO2. He counsels Takabana to socialize with others in order to make new friends. In school, Kota offers to organize a group game for them. He recruits other players who aren't playing to join them in a tournament, and they all participated together. At the council office, Takabana is given the responsibility of helping Yutaka, who is unable to complete his tasks, and as a result they collaborate. Despite appreciating Yutaka, Takabana finds that he doesn't like being the center of attention. He invites Soro to play with them in another group game, and while they are playing, one player makes fun of another, and to Takabana's surprise, Yutaka is revealed as the culprit when he confronts him. The following day, Yutaka decides not to go to school as he feels exposed to the fact that his persona in real life is drastically different. Meanwhile, Izumi asks Takabana to make amends with Yutaka in order to keep PSO2's concept alive in the classroom. Later on, Yutaka and Takabana reconcile, and Takabana counsels Yutaka to keep his good nature and avoid trying to be someone he is not. Izumi then admits that she is Soro as Takabana approaches to give his report to her, and he teases her since he already knew. Izumi asks Takabana to accompany her to the annual ARK's fan fiesta of PSO2 and he accepts. In class, he rejects Kota's invitation, which makes him sad. At the event, a large number of PSO2 players are together playing games, eating, sharing, and bonding in real life. Takabana and Izumi register and receive their compulsory character name tag, which makes it easier for players to recognize each other in the real world. As they were discussing, Kota sees them without their knowledge and becomes angry that Takabana stood him up for a girl. Still angry, he decides not to go over to them and leaves. A girl then walks up to Takabana and introduces herself. Excitedly, she invites other people from their group of players to meet Takabana and Izumi. Everyone compliments each other and they are particularly surprised that Soro is a female. Izumi is embarrassed and shy at the group, suggesting that she is dating Takabana, which they both refuse. After leaving the table, Takabana meets Kota and clarifies that he is not on a date with Izumi but is the student council representative. All around the school, the rumor has spread that Takabana and Suzuki are in a relationship, as she is weirdly attached to him and follows him everywhere in an attempt to profile him. Takabana tries to make everyone understand that the rumors are false, but rather than believe him, the students think he is taking advantage of the new girl. At the council office, a letter arrives informing schools to exchange equipment for use to cut down costs. This requires a meeting of secretarial executives. Izumi delegates Takabana to attend with her and they set out for the host school. They meet Suzuki on the bus and Izumi questions Takabana about the rumors of their relationship, which he refutes. At their destination, Suzuki also gets off the bus, which piques Izumi's interest, so they follow her to see where she will go. Walking up to Suzuki, Izumi tells her she should always seek her help whenever she is in need. Suzuki asked her to help her shop for clothes and they did. Later in the virtual world, Suzuki shows her expertise by helping Izumi and Takabana to defeat their enemies. Takabana begs her to be part of their party, but she refuses and leaves. The student council is set for their annual overnight recreational trip taken in the guise of meetings. This year, they are visiting a hot spring resort, which makes Kota jealous of Takabana, especially since he will be in the same place as Izumi. At the resort, the council members are all present except Suzuki, who is busy on a mission. After checking in, the owner of the resort asks Takabana to play a game of PSO2 later at night, but his wife refuses as it distracts him from work. Similarly, Izumi stops Takabana from playing PSO2 till the end of the term because at the school board meeting, while she makes a presentation about the prospects of playing video games and still studying, she is informed that Takabana's grades have dropped. Izumi confronts Takabana and he confesses to leaving schoolwork to play games. This displeases Izumi as she blames herself for making him play. She gives him a pile of workbooks to solve while others are playing games. After working for long hours, Takabana finishes his work and hangs out at the hot spring where Suzuki meets him. Meanwhile, Izumi searches the whole place for Takabana to keep him company to no avail. Back at school, Izumi answers the teacher's questions correctly even while she plays PSO2 with Takabana. Everyone, including Mika and a student council board member, wants Izumi's attention. But only Takabana seems to be getting it, which makes her extremely jealous and angry. After the day's work, Izumi turns down Mika's offer to hang out with her. Something strange begins to happen in connection to PSO2. After school hours, Mika returns to her room to play PSO2. Suddenly, the enemy she tries to counter visibly fills her room. Suzuki seems to know more about PSO2 than every other player around. While this is happening in Mika's room, Suzuki instinctively runs there, but the enemy has disappeared already. The next day, Mika is absent from school, which raises concerns as she is nowhere in sight. As the search for her continues, Izumi and Takabana search for her in the virtual world. There, she is surrounded by a crowd of enemies. Takabana, Izumi, and Suzuki fight their way in and release her. Everyone except Suzuki seems to understand what is wrong. The next morning, Izumi and Takabana meet Mika on their way to school and she explains that she has been unconscious in the hospital, but something weird is amiss, as Takabana notices the same hand injury she sustained in the virtual world in real life. The next day at school, Takabana watches Suzuki closely, intending to find out her connection to PSO2. Meanwhile, the student council is planning an after-party for the school festival and Izumi wants the cooperation of all club leaders as the event means something to her. Takabana decides to spy on Suzuki as she goes to a deserted part of school, but she catches him in the act and warns him off. Because they are seen together, the news begins to get around once more that they are dating. At night, Suzuki engages in a phone conversation informing the person of an investigation and asks about the missing players of PSO2. In the virtual world, a player reports a missing neighbor, which worries Takabana, but Izumi rebukes him as she believes the incident is a coincidence. After fighting off a group of enemies, Takabana inquires to know who Suzuki is, and she admits that she is a guardian and in time you will understand. The next morning, Takabana resumes spying on Suzuki outside of school and gets caught again. At school, he encounters one of the enemies in real life, a giant scary-looking monster. Suzuki appears and fights it off. During the fight, Takabana's outfit changes into his PSO2 costume, to his astonishment. When the enemy has been defeated, Takabana mandates Suzuki to tell him what everything is about. Suddenly, Takabana and Suzuki both disappear into an unfamiliar place. There he finally learns the truth. ARC's intelligence commander, Kasura, introduces himself to Takabana and explains that PSO2 is not a virtual game, but a real-life experience controlled from this headquarters. The enemies known as Darkers are trying to possess the world, and a special kind named Dark Felts, the head of all Darkers, needs a strong vessel to possess, which is why it is coming after Takabana because of his powers. Hence, Suzuki watched over him. Soon, Takabana becomes involved in real-world ARK's activities, and they secretly fight Darkers even as they increase in their numbers. At school, Kota confronts Takabana about his continuous absence for a few days, and Takabana excuses himself with plans for the upcoming student festival. Suzuki attempts to leave school for another mission and Takabana follows her. She refuses, telling him to rest from all the consecutive battles. Later, Dark Felts attacks Takabana again and Suzuki rescues him. Afterwards, she instructs him to call her Eika, like the other ARKs, to be in tune. As everyone is geared towards the school festival, the members of the student council work all day long to put everything in place. At the office, Takabana slips by referring to Suzuki as Eika at the students' council office, which arouses suspicion. Later that night, Takabana and Eika resume duty as guardians fighting off Darkers descending to Earth, but they are soon tired from multitasking. Kasura sends a special ARC member to relieve them and, together, they conquer all the Darkers available. Meanwhile, Izumi is in her dorm thinking about Takabana and Suzuki. The day of the student festival has finally arrived. Soon, Suzuki senses the presence of a Darker at the students' council office and runs to intervene. Izumi intercepts Takabana on his way to the dumpster and he clarifies again that he is not in a relationship with Suzuki, which makes Izumi relieved. Suddenly, a giant Darker appears before them, causing a stare. As it flings Takabana to the side, Izumi finds herself changing to her PSO2 character, and she begins to fight. Takabana gets into form, but it is too late as the Darker disappears with her just as Eika arrives. Kota witnesses everything from a distance and confronts Takabana for the truth, which he finds hard to believe. Takabana leaves him and goes to the other planet where Izumi is in captivity. Takabana and Eika attempt to fight, but it is useless as Dark Felts has possessed her body. Suzuki saves him from an attack and brings him back through his pain. Surprisingly, Kota appears and tries to hold them off. Takabana wakes up at the headquarters and demands to proceed to rescue Izumi. Kasura informs him that the person he sees is no longer Izumi, as the Dark Felts has chosen to possess her body and it will be dangerous for him to fight. Kasura and Suzuki jointly beg Takabana not to leave the mission to them. Back at school, Takabana apologizes to the student council for the absence of Izumi and promises to bring her back to them. Equally, he apologizes for Suzuki's absence at her station. He finally explains everything to Kota even though he finds it hard to believe. Takabana comes back to the headquarters, telling Kasura that he is ready to rescue Izumi. Thoughtfully, Kota gathers all their friends from the virtual world and they all come together to fight the Darkers. Takabana and Suzuki behold the final form of the Dark Felts as Izumi's body disappears inside it. At the student council office, while they are waiting for Takabana to fulfill his promise and bring back Izumi, they continue to do damage control between the invited schools and students so as not to make Izumi's absence obvious. Back on the other planet, Dark Felts is down and in the process of regeneration while Kasura continues to direct the progress of the battle from the headquarters. He instructs Takabana to be geared for going inside the Dark Felts to bring back Izumi. When everything is set, he is cautioned not to let the darkness swallow him as he will not be able to come out. Inside the Dark Felts, he begins to remember the past as he searches for Izumi. When he finds her, he unbinds her and together they make their way out. Together they all chant a spell that destroys the Dark Felts and brings them back from its planet. Suzuki leaves them behind since the mission is complete, which saddens them. Back in school, the after party is a success and everyone, especially Izumi, is happy and fulfilled. After Izumi's graduation, Takabana becomes the new president and Suzuki comes back for a new mission. And this brings the anime to an end.